The distant crash of glass shattering against the wall sent Tessa Edwards scrambling from her bed, her bare feet cold against the wooden floorboards as she hurried to secure the latch on her bedroom door. It was happening again. Her father's drunken rage echoed throughout their small ranch house on the outskirts of Silverton, Colorado. The year was 1878, and at 22, Tessa had endured her father's alcohol-fueled tirades for far too long. "Where's my dinner?" Vernon Edwards bellowed from the kitchen, his words slurring together. "Worthless girl, just like your mother." Tessa pressed her back against the door, closing her eyes as she tried to steady her breathing. Her mother had passed away 3 years ago from consumption, leaving Tessa alone with a father who had once been a respected rancher, but now spent his days drowning his grief in whiskey. "I left your dinner warming by the stove." She called back, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound calm. "I told you before I went to bed." Another crash, this time followed by heavy footsteps stomping toward her room. Tessa's heart pounded in her chest as the doorknob rattled. "Open this door." Vernon's fist pounded against the wood. "You think you can lock me out of my own house? After everything I've done for you, please, Pa," Tessa begged, tears welling in her eyes. "Just eat your dinner and go to sleep. We can talk in the morning when you're feeling better." "Don't tell me what to do." The door shuddered as he threw his weight against it. "You're just waiting for me to die so you can sell this place, aren't you? Just like those vultures from the Blackwater Mining Company who keep circling." Tessa wiped away her tears. The mining company had indeed been pressuring local ranchers to sell their land, but she had no intention of giving up their home. It was all she had left of her mother. "That's not true, Pa. I would never, liar." Another crash against the door. "Your mother never would have abandoned me like this." Tessa flinched at his words. She'd done everything she could to keep their small ranch running while caring for her increasingly volatile father. Each day was harder than the last, with Vernon drinking away what little money they had and driving away the few ranch hands who'd stayed on after her mother's death. Eventually, Vernon's shouts diminished to muttering, and his heavy footsteps retreated. Tessa slid down against the door, hugging her knees to her chest as she listened to him rummaging through the kitchen cabinets, likely searching for another bottle. Outside, a late spring storm had rolled in, blanketing the valley in dense fog. Tessa rose from the floor and moved to her window, pushing aside the thin curtain to peer into the misty darkness. Sometimes she imagined just walking into that fog and disappearing, leaving everything behind. The ranch had once been prosperous, with cattle grazing on the slopes and fields of hay stretching toward the mountains. Now the fences were broken in places, and most of the cattle had been sold off to pay debts. Her father had been a different man before her mother's illness, stern but fair, hard-working and respected throughout the county. The whiskey had changed him, turning his grief into rage that seemed to consume him more with each passing day. Tessa startled as she heard the front door slam. Through the fog-shrouded window, she could make out her father's silhouette stumbling toward the barn. He often went there to drink in private, sometimes falling asleep in the hay beside the few horses they had left. With a sigh of relief, Tessa unlocked her door and ventured out into the main room of the house. Glass glittered on the floor from a broken bottle, and her carefully prepared stew had been appended on the table, its contents dripping onto the floor. As she knelt to clean up the mess, tears blurred her vision. How much longer could she live like this? The nearest town was 10 miles away, and she had no money of her own, no relatives to turn to. The few friends she'd had before her mother's death had drifted away, uncomfortable with Vernon's increasingly unpredictable behavior. The wind picked up outside, howling around the eaves of the house and rattling the windows. Tessa worked methodically, cleaning the spilled food and sweeping up the broken glass. As she emptied the dustpan into the waste bin, a sound cut through the wind, the distant rhythm of hoofbeats. Visitors were rare, especially at this hour and in such weather. Tessa's heart quickened as she moved to the window, straining to see through the fog. A figure on horseback materialized from the mist, moving slowly up the path toward the house. Fear gripped her. Was it one of the men from the mining company coming to pressure them again? Or worse, had her father's gambling debts finally caught up with them? The rider came closer, and Tessa could see it was a man on a dark horse. He rode tall in the saddle, his face obscured by the brim of his hat and a bandana pulled up against the damp night air. A rifle was secured to his saddle, and a long duster coat flapped behind him in the wind. Tessa grabbed her father's shotgun from above the door, checking that it was loaded before stepping onto the porch. She had never fired it at anything but targets and game, but the stranger didn't need to know that. "That's far enough," she called out as the rider approached the house. "State your business or turn around." The rider halted his horse, raising his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. "Miss Edwards." His voice was deep, carrying clearly through the fog. "My name's Brody Marshall. I'm looking for Vernon Edwards. What business do you have with my father?" Tessa kept the shotgun steady, though her hands wanted to tremble. The man pulled down his bandana, revealing a face younger than she'd expected, perhaps no more than 26 or 27. His features were handsome but weathered from the sun, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes that seemed to catch what little light there was in the misty night. "I was hired to deliver a message," he said, slowly reaching into his coat pocket and pulling out an envelope. "From Judge Parker in Silverton. It's important." Tessa hesitated, then lowered the shotgun slightly. "My father's not available right now." Brody Marshall's eyes took in the scene, Tessa alone on the porch with a shotgun, the house dark behind her, and the obvious tension in her stance. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I was told to deliver this directly to Mr. Edwards. It concerns the deed to this property." Tessa's stomach tightened. "The deed? There's a dispute about ownership. The mining company has filed papers claiming your father sold them rights to the land." He paused, studying her reaction. "Judge Parker wanted to warn him before the company men arrived." "He never sold anything," Tessa said firmly, though doubt crept into her mind. Her father had been disappearing into town more frequently, returning with no money and no explanation. Could he have gambled away their land without telling her? A crash from the direction of the barn interrupted their conversation. Vernon's angry shouts carried through the fog as he staggered out, a bottle in one hand. "Who the hell are you talking to?" he bellowed, making his unsteady way toward them. "Get off my property." Brody Marshall turned in his saddle to face the approaching man. "Mr. Edwards, I have a message from Judge Parker." Vernon squinted through the fog, his face contorting with anger. "Another damn lawyer. I told those mining vultures I ain't selling." "Pa, he says they're claiming you already sold them rights to our land," Tessa said, her voice tight with anxiety. Vernon swayed on his feet, pointing an accusatory finger at Brody. "That's a lie. I never signed nothing." Brody dismounted, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Sir, I'm just delivering the message. The judge wanted to make sure you were prepared. They're coming with papers tomorrow." Vernon lurched forward, his face flushed with rage and alcohol. "I'll kill any man who tries to take my land." Tessa moved between them, the shotgun forgotten at her side. "Pa, please, let's just read what the judge sent." Her father's hand shot out, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "You stay out of this. This is men's business, Mr. Edwards." Brody's voice hardened as he stepped forward. "You're hurting your daughter." Vernon rounded on him, the bottle swinging wildly. "Who are you to tell me how to treat my own flesh and blood? Get off my land before I put a bullet in you." "I'll go," Brody said calmly, "but first let go of her." Vernon's grip tightened on Tessa's arm, making her wince. "You don't give the orders here, stranger." What happened next was so quick that Tessa barely had time to react. Brody moved forward, catching Vernon's wrist and twisting it just enough to break his grip on Tessa's arm. Vernon stumbled backward, bellowing in outrage. "You son of a—" Vernon lunged at Brody, but the younger man sidestepped him easily, causing Vernon to fall face first into the mud. "Pa!" Tessa rushed to his side, but Vernon pushed her away, his face contorted with humiliation and rage. "Get away from me." He staggered to his feet, mud coating his clothes. "Both of you get off my property." "This is my home too," Tessa said, her voice breaking. "And you're not yourself, Pa. You need to sober up before those mining men come tomorrow." Vernon's eyes narrowed as he looked between Tessa and Brody. "I see how it is. You're working with them, aren't you? My own daughter betraying me." "That's not true. I watched your mother die inch by inch, and now you want to finish the job." Vernon's voice cracked with emotion before hardening again. "Get out, get out." He lunged at Tessa, but Brody stepped between them, catching Vernon's arm. The older man's momentum carried them both to the ground, where they struggled in the mud. Despite his drunkenness, Vernon fought with the strength of a man possessed, landing a solid punch to Brody's jaw before the younger man could restrain him. "Stop it, both of you," Tessa cried, grabbing at her father's shirt to pull him away. Vernon's elbow caught her in the chest, knocking her backward. She lost her footing on the slippery ground and fell, her head striking the edge of the porch steps with a sickening crack. The world went silent for a moment, darkness edging her vision. She was vaguely aware of the struggle stopping, of voices calling her name and then strong arms lifting her. "Tessa, can you hear me?" Brody's face swam into focus above her, concern etched in his features. "What happened?" she mumbled, reaching up to touch the back of her head. Her fingers came away wet with blood. "You hit your head," Brody said, his voice tight with worry. "We need to get you inside." "Where's Pa?" She tried to sit up, but dizziness forced her back down. "He's—" Brody hesitated. He saw the blood and took off toward the barn. "I think seeing you hurt sobered him up quick." Tessa closed her eyes, tears mixing with the light rain that had begun to fall. "He didn't mean it. He's not himself since Ma died." Brody said nothing as he carefully lifted her, carrying her into the house. He settled her on a chair while he found a clean cloth to press against the wound on her head. "It's not deep," he assured her after examining the cut. "Head wounds just bleed a lot, but you should rest." Tessa nodded, then winced at the movement. "The letter, what does it say?" Brody retrieved the now muddy envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Tessa opened it with trembling fingers, scanning the judge's neat handwriting. "They're saying Pa signed over mineral rights while drunk," she said, her voice hollow. "They got him to mark an X on a document 3 weeks ago. The judge says it might not hold up in court, but they're coming to take possession tomorrow unless we can prove Pa wasn't of sound mind." "I'll testify to that," Brody said grimly, nodding toward the door where Vernon had disappeared into the fog. Tessa shook her head. "Why would you help us? You don't even know us." Brody was quiet for a moment, wringing out the cloth in a basin of water before gently cleaning mud from her face. "Judge Parker asked me to deliver the message because I used to work for the mining company. I know how they operate, getting men drunk, tricking them into signing papers. I quit when I saw what they were doing to families like yours." "So you're not a lawyer?" A small smile touched his lips. "No, madam. Just a ranch hand who knows how to read and write better than most. The judge hired me to help folks who are being taken advantage of." Outside, the wind howled louder and rain began to patter against the windows. Tessa's eyes drifted to the door. "He'll be back," she said softly. "He always comes back once he cools down." Brody's expression was doubtful, but he nodded. "I should go look for him. It's not safe out there in this weather, especially if he's still drinking." "No," Tessa caught his arm. "He's too proud. He won't come back while you're here, and I don't want to be alone right now." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection formed in crisis. Brody nodded slowly. "I'll stay until morning," he agreed. "But first thing, we need to find your father and sober him up before those mining men arrive." As the night deepened, the fog thickened around the small ranch house. Tessa drifted in and out of sleep, her head throbbing. Brody kept watch, tending the fire and occasionally stepping onto the porch to listen for any sign of Vernon's return. It was past midnight when Tessa woke fully, finding Brody sitting at the table studying the judge's letter in the dim lamplight. "Any sign of him?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep. Brody shook his head. "Nothing. But his horse is still in the barn. He can't have gone far." Tessa struggled to her feet, ignoring Brody's protests. "I need to find him. He could be hurt." "You're in no condition to go searching in this weather," Brody argued, but Tessa was already reaching for her coat. "He's my father," she said simply. "For all his faults, he's the only family I have left." Brody sighed, then stood and grabbed his own coat. "At least let me come with you." They ventured into the night, the fog so thick they could barely see 10 feet ahead. Brody insisted on holding Tessa's arm to steady her as they made their way toward the barn. The structure was empty except for the horses and a scattering of empty bottles. "He sometimes goes to the creek when he wants to be alone," Tessa said, pointing toward a path that led behind the barn. "It's where my mother used to like to sit." The path was slippery with mud, and more than once, Tessa would have fallen if not for Brody's strong hand supporting her. The fog swirled around them, ghostly tendrils that seemed to reach out and pull them deeper into the night. They found Vernon at the creek's edge, sitting on a large rock where Tessa's mother had often mended clothes in the summer sunshine. He was slumped forward, his bottle empty beside him, seemingly oblivious to the rain that soaked through his shirt. "Pa." Tessa approached cautiously, her heart breaking at the sight of him looking so defeated. Vernon raised his head slowly, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. "Tessa, is that really you?" "Of course it's me, Pa. I saw you fall. There was blood." His voice cracked, "just like your mother at the end. So much blood when she coughed." Tessa knelt beside him, ignoring the pain in her head. "I'm fine, Pa, just a small cut." Vernon's eyes drifted to Brody, who stood a respectful distance away. "You should go with him, Tessa. Get away from here, away from me." "What? No, Pa, I'm not leaving." "I've ruined everything," Vernon said, his shoulders slumping. "Your mother built this place with me. We had dreams for it, for you, and I've destroyed it all." "We can fix it," Tessa insisted. "Together." Vernon shook his head, his eyes filling with tears. "I signed it away, Tessa. Not just the mineral rights. Everything. The whole ranch." The admission hung in the air between them, as heavy as the fog that surrounded them. "You're sure?" Tessa asked, her voice barely audible above the rushing of the creek. "I thought I was just signing for credit at the saloon," Vernon said, shame evident in his voice. "I was so drunk. They put the paper in front of me, told me to mark it. I found out later what I'd really done." "Why didn't you tell me?" Tessa's voice broke. "How could I? After everything else I've put you through." Vernon covered his face with his hands. "I thought I could win it back gambling, make enough to buy it back before you ever found out, but I just kept losing." Brody stepped forward. "Mr. Edwards, if you were too drunk to understand what you were signing, we might be able to contest it. The judge is willing to help." Vernon looked up, his expression bitter. and tell the whole county what a fool I've been, what a disgrace I've become." "Better that than losing your home," Brody said firmly. "It's not just the ranch," Vernon admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I owe money all over town, gambling debts. That's why I've been hiding out here, drinking myself stupid. Men are looking for me, Tessa. Bad men." Tessa felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her. Everything she thought she knew about their situation had been a lie. The ranch was already lost. Her father was in danger, and she had been blind to it all. "We need to go back to the house," Brody said, glancing at the sky where the first hint of gray suggested dawn was approaching. "Those mining men will be here soon, and we need to be ready." Vernon didn't resist as they helped him to his feet. The walk back to the house was silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The fog had begun to thin, revealing the sorry state of the once proud ranch in the pale morning light. Inside, Brody built up the fire while Tessa made strong coffee. Vernon sat at the table, looking years older than he had the previous evening. "I'm sorry, Tessa," he said, his voice hoarse. "You deserved better than me." Tessa placed a cup of coffee in front of him. "You're my father. I love you, even when it's hard." Vernon's hands trembled as he lifted the cup. "I kept seeing your mother in you. Every day you look more like her. It was like losing her all over again every morning when you'd smile at me across the table." "Pa, please don't. No, let me say this." Vernon took a deep breath. "I've been a coward, drowning my grief instead of facing it. I've been cruel to you when you needed me most. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." Tears slid down Tessa's cheeks as she reached across the table to take her father's hand. "I forgive you, Pa. But you need to stop drinking. We can't fix anything if you're not sober." Vernon nodded, squeezing her hand. "I know. I promise I'll try." The sound of approaching horses broke the moment. Brody moved to the window, his expression tightening. "They're here," he said. 3 men from the company and 2 others who looked like hired guns. Vernon pushed himself up from the table, his face set with determination. "I'll talk to them. This is my mess." "We'll talk to them together," Tessa insisted, standing beside her father. Brody checked his pistol before tucking it back into his holster. "I'll back you up, but let me do the talking first. I know these men." They stepped onto the porch as the riders approached. Tessa recognized Howard Simmons, the mining company's local representative, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit despite the early hour and muddy conditions. "Well, well," Simmons called out, a smile spreading across his face that didn't reach his eyes. "The whole family's up to greet us. And Mr. Marshall, what a surprise to see you here." "Simmons," Brody acknowledged coldly, "these folks know about the paper you tricked Mr. Edwards into signing." Simmons dismounted, his boots sinking into the mud. "Tricked?" "He signed willingly enough for a bottle of whiskey and credit at the poker table." "He was drunk," Tessa said, stepping forward. "You took advantage of him." "The law doesn't care much about a man's state of mind when he signs a contract, Miss Edwards," Simmons replied smoothly. "Only that he signed it, which he did." He pulled a folded document from his coat pocket, complete with witnesses. "Witnesses who work for you," Brody countered. "Judge Parker is ready to hear this case, Simmons. He knows your methods." Uncertainty flickered across Simmons's face before his confident smile returned. "By all means, take it to court. In the meantime, this property legally belongs to the Blackwater Mining Company." He nodded to the men behind him. "We'll be setting up operations immediately." Vernon stepped forward, his face pale but his voice steady. "There's something you should know about this land, Simmons." "And what's that, Edwards?" "The reason I never wanted to sell, even when times got hard." Vernon's eyes gleamed with a clarity Tessa hadn't seen in years. "There's no silver here, not a trace. I had it surveyed 3 times before my wife took ill." Simmons's smile faltered. Our geologists say differently. Your geologists are wrong, Vernon insisted. Or they're lying to you. This land is good for cattle and crops, nothing more. That's why we never sold, even when bigger ranches around us did. Brody looked at Vernon with new respect. Is that true? Vernon nodded. God's honest truth. The silver vein runs 2 miles east of here, always has. That's why the Blackwater Company has been buying up all the land around us. They're following the vein, but it doesn't touch our property. Simmons's face had turned an interesting shade of red. You're lying to save your worthless hide, Edwards. Am I? Vernon challenged. You're welcome to dig up every inch of my land. You won't find a speck of silver, but you'll waste a lot of time and money doing it. The mining men exchanged glances, uncertainty evident in their postures. We have a contract, Simmons insisted, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. A contract obtained through fraud, Brody countered. Judge Parker would be very interested to hear how you got Mr. Edwards to sign it. Tessa stepped forward, her chin raised. And I'm sure the other ranchers who sold to you would be interested to know you might have lied about the silver on their land too. Simmons's face darkened with anger. You're making a mistake crossing the Blackwater Company. No, Vernon said, his voice stronger than it had been in years. My mistake was drowning my sorrows instead of standing up for what's right. I'm done running, Simmons. Take us to court if you want, but you won't intimidate us off our land. For a tense moment, it seemed Simmons might order his men to force their way onto the property. But after exchanging looks with his companions, he folded the document and returned it to his pocket. This isn't over, Edwards, he warned. We'll be back with the sheriff. You do that, Brody said calmly, and we'll be here with Judge Parker's assessment of your so-called contract. Simmons spat on the ground before remounting his horse. With a final glare, he turned his horse and led his men away, their figures gradually disappearing into the remnants of fog that still clung to the lower pastures. As they watched the men leave, Tessa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She turned to her father, seeing him properly for the first time in years, not as the broken man he had become, but as the strong, principled rancher he once was. Is it true, Pa, about the silver? Vernon nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Your mother insisted we have the land surveyed before we built here. She was always the practical one. His smile faded. I'm so sorry, Tessa, for everything. I know, Pa. She hugged him, feeling his arms wrap around her tentatively, then with growing strength. Over her father's shoulder, Tessa met Brody's eyes. Something passed between them, understanding, respect, and something more that made her heart quicken. What now? She asked as she stepped back from her father. Now, Brody said, we prepare for when they come back, because they will. And I start making amends, Vernon added, his voice rough with emotion. Starting with getting sober and fixing this ranch. We'll help, Brody offered. I know good people who'll stand with you against the mining company. Vernon studied the younger man for a long moment before extending his hand. I misjudged you, Marshall. Thank you for standing by my daughter when I couldn't. Brody shook his hand firmly. She's worth standing by, sir. Tessa felt her cheeks warm under Brody's gaze, which held admiration and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. The days that followed were challenging. True to his word, Vernon stopped drinking, though the withdrawal left him shaking and ill for days. Brody stayed, helping with repairs around the ranch and riding into town to consult with Judge Parker about their case against the mining company. Word spread quickly through the county about the Blackwater Company's fraudulent practices. Other ranchers came forward with similar stories, strengthening their case. The mining men returned twice more, but each time they found the Edwards Ranch occupied not just by Vernon and Tessa, but by neighboring ranchers standing in solidarity. Through it all, Tessa found herself drawing closer to Brody. He was unlike any man she had ever known, strong yet gentle, principled yet understanding. He listened when she spoke of her dreams for the ranch, of the life she had once imagined for herself before her mother's death, and her father's decline had trapped her in a cycle of just surviving day to day. One evening, a month after he had first ridden through the fog to their ranch, Brody found Tessa sitting by the creek, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Your father's looking much better," he said, as he sat beside her on the large rock. "He was showing me his plans for rebuilding the north pasture fence." Tessa smiled. "I never thought I'd see him like this again, clear-eyed, making plans for the future. It's like having my father back from the dead." "He's a strong man," Brody observed. "It takes courage to face your demons." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the gentle gurgle of the creek and the evening calls of birds settling in for the night. "Judge Parker says the mining company is willing to settle," Brody finally said. "They'll tear up the contract and compensate your father for the trouble they caused. They're afraid of how many other contracts might be challenged if yours goes to court." Relief washed over Tessa. "So it's over. We keep the ranch," Brody nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "It's over. The ranch is yours, free and clear." Impulsively, Tessa threw her arms around him. Brody hesitated only a moment before returning her embrace, his arms strong and secure around her. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "You don't need to thank me," he replied, his voice low. "Helping you and your father, it's given me purpose, something I've been searching for since I left home." Tessa pulled back slightly to look at him. "Where is home for you?" A shadow crossed his face. "Nowhere anymore. My parents' ranch in Wyoming was lost to drought 3 years ago. They moved east to live with my sister, but I couldn't bear to leave the West. So you've been wandering ever since, more or less. Taking work where I could find it, moving on when things got complicated. Until now." Their eyes met and Tessa felt her heart skip. "And now," Brody reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face, "now I'm finding reasons to stay." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. In the distance, the ranch house stood solid against the darkening sky, smoke curling from the chimney where her father was preparing dinner, a small but meaningful sign of his continued recovery. "I should head back," Tessa said reluctantly. "Pa will be wondering where I am." Brody nodded, but neither of them moved. The air between them seemed charged with electricity, drawing them closer together. "Tessa," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I know it hasn't been long, but a crash from the direction of the house interrupted him." They both turned to see Vernon stumbling out onto the porch, clutching his chest. "Pa!" Tessa cried, leaping to her feet and racing toward the house with Brody close behind. They reached Vernon just as his knees buckled. Brody caught him before he hit the ground, easing him onto the porch steps. "Can't breathe," Vernon gasped, his face alarmingly pale. "My chest." "I'll ride for the doctor," Brody said immediately, but Vernon grabbed his arm. "No time," he wheezed. "Tessa, the strongbox under my bed, there's a letter. For you." "Pa, don't talk like that," Tessa pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "You're going to be fine." Vernon's eyes were clearer than they had been in years as he looked up at his daughter. "I'm proud of you, girl, so proud. You're just like your mother, strong, beautiful, stubborn as a mule." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I should have told you every day." His eyes drifted to Brody. "You take care of her, you hear? She deserves the best." "I will, sir," Brody promised, his voice thick with emotion. "But you're going to be around to make sure I do right by her." Vernon's smile widened briefly before pain contorted his features again. "Tessa, promise me. Promise you'll live the life you want. Don't let anything hold you back. Not this ranch, not memories, nothing." "I promise, Pa," Tessa sobbed, clutching his hand. "But I need you to fight. Please." Vernon's grip on her hand tightened momentarily, then gradually relaxed. His eyes remained fixed on her face, filled with love and regret, before the light in them slowly dimmed. Pa. Tessa shook him, but Vernon Edwards was beyond hearing her calls. The days that followed passed in a blur of grief and practical necessities. Neighbors and townspeople Tessa barely knew came to pay their respects, many expressing surprise and admiration for the changes Vernon had begun making to the ranch in his final weeks. Brody stayed, handling arrangements and keeping the ranch running while Tessa worked through her grief. In the strongbox, she found the letter her father had mentioned, a confession of his failings and his hopes for her future, along with the deed to the ranch, and a small sum of money he had managed to save during his brief period of sobriety. "He wanted to surprise you," Brody explained as they sat together on the porch one evening, a week after the funeral. "He was working with Judge Parker to make sure everything was legally yours, free and clear." Tessa wiped away tears, folding the letter carefully. "He was trying so hard to make things right. It's not fair that he didn't get more time." "No, it's not," Brody agreed, taking her hand gently in his. "But he died sober with his dignity intact, knowing his daughter was provided for. That would have meant everything to him." They sat in companionable silence as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully in pastures that were slowly being restored to their former condition. "What will you do now?" Brody asked finally. Tessa took a deep breath, looking out over the land that had been her home her entire life. "Keep my promise to him, live the life I want." She turned to face Brody, her heart in her eyes. "But I'm not sure what that life is anymore." Brody's gaze was steady, his hand warm around hers. "You could sell the ranch, start fresh somewhere else. You're young, Tessa. The world is open to you." "Is that what you think I should do?" "I think you should follow your heart," he said simply. "Whatever that means." Tessa studied him, this man who had ridden out of the fog and into her life just when she needed him most. In the short time she had known him, he had become essential to her, his strength, his quiet humor, his unwavering support. "My heart is here," she said softly, "on this land." But not just because of memories or obligation. She squeezed his hand. "There are new reasons to stay." Understanding dawned in Brody's eyes, followed by hope. "Tessa, I don't have much to offer. No land, not much money. I don't care about that," she interrupted. "I care about you, who you are, how you live your life, the way you look at the world. I care about the way you make me feel when I'm with you." Brody stood, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. "How do I make you feel?" Tessa's heart raced as she looked up at him. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The kiss that followed was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that took her breath away. Brody's arms tightened around her, solid and secure, as though he never intended to let her go. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the first stars had appeared in the darkening sky. "Stay," Tessa whispered. "Not just for now. Stay for good." Brody brushed his thumb across her cheek, his eyes filled with emotion. "Are you sure? Running a ranch is hard work, even for two people." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "This is my home, our home if you want it to be." "There's nothing I want more," he admitted, pressing his forehead to hers. "I've been searching for a place to belong since I lost my family's ranch. I never expected to find it here with you." As night fell completely, bringing with it a gentle fog that drifted across the pastures, Tessa and Brody stood wrapped in each other's arms on the porch of the ranch house. The challenges ahead were many: rebuilding the ranch, establishing themselves as partners in life and work, healing from the wounds of the past. But for the first time in years, Tessa felt hope blossoming in her heart. The fog that had shrouded her future for so long was lifting, revealing a path forward illuminated by love and possibility. In the months and years that followed, the Edwards ranch flourished under their care. They married in the spring, with Judge Parker officiating and the entire community gathering to celebrate. Vernon's grave on the hillside overlooking the creek became a place of peace rather than sorrow, a reminder of redemption and second chances. And on foggy nights, when mist crept across the valleys and wrapped around the house, Tessa would sometimes stand on the porch and remember how it all began with a father lost in grief and anger, and a stranger who rode through the midnight fog and changed her life forever.